Good evening, everyone. This is the Wednesday, June 12th meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission. The first order of business is to find out if we have a quorum. Ms. Jones?
Sure. Commissioner Draper? Commissioner Dubin?
Here.
Commissioner Goddard?
Here.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac?
Here.
Commissioner Pagozzi? Commissioner Sloss? And Chair Lewis.
Here. So, finding that we have a quorum,
Yes.
I call this meeting to order. I would like to start out by saying a few things. First, we'll be hearing a continued item from a previous meeting of which I was not present as chair. I would like to assure everyone that I have reviewed the recordings and all the written materials and feel myself up to date on the information. Second of all, I would like to just read a little bit of the rules about ex parte communications, and I'll just read from the rules of the committee. Ex parte communications are communications with any party which has petitioned the Commission for relief or is supporting or opposing a petition before the Commission when hearing is not in session. In addition, any communications with interested or even relatively disinterested members of the community regarding something that is before the board are also ex parte communications. Because the actions of the Commission are administrative decisions that are supposed to be based on the record, ex parte communications may violate constitutional due process requirements, statutes governing zoning and administrative decisions, and notions of fairness. In addition, ex parte communications often lead to the public's perception that commissioners are subject to the influence or are acting unfairly. For these reasons, ex parte communications between any interested party and a member of the Commission are not permitted. While members of the Commission should visit sites that are subject to their hearings, they should not have conversations with others about matters that are before the Commission prior to the Commission's decision. This should not be interpreted to prevent a member of the Commission from attending a community meeting. However, because a Commission decision shall be based on all evidence and comments during deliberation, it is improper for the Commission member to express any opinion expressing a view as to the proper Commission decision prior to the time such a decision or recommendation has been made by the Commission. All right. When we're before we get to approval of the minutes and things, I'll just get all the procedural things out of the way. If you're going to be testifying, you should have signed up outside on the list. And if you're going to speak to any matter today, also, if you're going to speak, I would like to ask you at this time to raise your right hand and swear that you will tell the truth. Do you swear to tell the truth? Yes. All right, very good. Thank you. Let's see. When you come up to the microphone, can you state your name and your address so we have it as on the record? And when we get to public comment, if you are speaking as an individual, you'll be limited to 2 minutes, so please be concise and brief. If you're reiterating an opinion that has been previously said, we would appreciate for brevity that you just say, I agree with the person before. I mean, it's important that we get the magnitude of the impression, of what people are saying, but we don't need to hear the same thing repeated endlessly. If you are speaking on behalf of an organization, you will be allotted more time. We will take that testimony, but you will have to be specifically representing that organization. In that case, we'll allow 10 minutes of public comment. So, let's see. The first order of business is old business. No, I'm sorry. There's approval of the minutes of the April 10th and the, well, let's do them one at a time. Let's do approval of the minutes of the April 10th meeting. Are there any comments or corrections on those minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Okay, move. Very good. Commissioner
Second.
Goddard. Seconded, Commissioner Isaac. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved. So the second minutes are the minutes of the May 29th meeting. Although I have reviewed them and reviewed the video, I am going to abstain from those. Are there any questions, comments, corrections to those? I actually have, if I can get this, although I was not there, I do have a correction, I believe. It states that Chairman Lewis called the meeting to order. It was actually Commissioner Isaac, or Vice Chair Isaac, called the meeting to order. And I question whether Commissioner Isaac made the motion to approve the minutes, if that can be verified. All right. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of the May 29th, 2019 meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission? Commissioner Halleck moves.
Second.
Commissioner Isaac seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
All against? The minutes are approved. All right, so the first order of business is a continuance of number 19 PLND-0041, a zoning ordinance text amendment pursuant to the City Code Title 6 zoning and to Chapter 8 residential districts of the zoning ordinance to allow office uses and revise special conditions for office uses within the residential districts. So I believe we made our way through. We've heard, we've had public questioning from the commissioners. We've gone through public comment for those people who were present last week. But we still have you still have the ability to comment if you did not speak last week. The process was continued by Miss Marcia Kerr, and with the purpose of disputing or rebutting facts or evidence presented at the previous meeting. So we would like to start the meeting with her testimony. So,
My name is Marcia Kerr, and I am owner at 1738 Chicago Avenue, which is located directly in one of the areas identified in the zoning ordinance text amendment as subject to the zoning change. Thank you for granting my earlier request for an extension in order that we could present a rebuttal to the application. I would like to introduce Joan Safford, who will outline our objections to the proposed text amendment.
Good evening. I'm Joan Safford. I live at 1618 Wesley Avenue, Evanston, and I've been a resident at that address for 52 years. On May 29th, the Evanston Plan Commission began its hearing in consideration of an application submitted by Alderman Judy Fisk, 1st Ward, to amend the text of the Evanston zoning ordinance regarding the types of office buildings that can be built as a special use on those lots in R5 and R6 residential districts that are adjacent to D2 and D3 downtown districts. Rather than the current restriction, which limits offices as a special use to a single or two-family home, which have been converted to offices under the terms of the proposed amendment, those lots adjacent to those downtown zones could be used for new construction of offices. Offices could be built to a height of 50 feet, 62 feet if a planned development in an R5 district, and 85 feet, 97 feet if a planned development if built in an R6 district. The city staff has identified 7 areas in R6 that are adjacent to D2 and D3 districts that would be subject to the proposed zoning text amendment. None have been identified adjacent to R5. There may be one, but I went through the map myself and found none. The properties identified are the Women's Club of Evanston, the WCTU local historic districts, including the Willard House, the Francis Willard House, a National Historic Landmark, 522 Church Street condominiums, 1738 Chicago Avenue condominiums, an apartment building east of the alley at Clark Street, excuse me, Lou Malnati's, the condominium building on the south side of Emerson Street at Sherman Avenue, and farther west, the Sojourner Church and parking lot, and the condominium just north of the post office at Oak Avenue. The small business, and I think there's a house behind the Sojourner Church also. The small businesses and apartments at Davis Street and Oak, and just south of Davis on Oak, the Courtyard Apartment at 1578 Oak, the large apartment building at 1575 Oak, and the King Home, just south of Davis on Oak. I might note, from the appearance in this room, that the disadvantage of it being a text amendment rather than a petition to rezone in order to put offices on such property is demonstrated this evening by the fact that there are no people, or very few people, here who, if there are any, who live in any of those other properties other than the library parking lot, the area of the library parking lot. And I think what this says, and I will continue about this, is that one major problem with this proposed change in the ordinance is that people would not have notice if there was a proposal for where they would be required to have notice if they were having a rezoning. On its surface, this proposed amendment to the text of the zoning ordinance appears to have general application to all of these properties in the vicinity of downtown. However, as a practical matter, this is a proposed zoning code text amendment is in fact like a special bill, equivalent to spot zoning. The clear purpose of it is to apply to the library parking lot, 1714 to 1720 Chicago Avenue. All of the other lots covered by the proposed amendment are occupied by structures which are well integrated into their established residential neighborhoods. Furthermore, the cost of demolition and of new construction on these sites would probably make them economically unfeasible as sites for new offices. One may therefore ask why anyone is proposing this amendment to the zoning ordinance text, except as a maneuver to try again to build the office building on the library parking lot, which the public, the Plan Commission, DAPR, and the City Council, after extensive public testimony and deliberation, have already emphatically defeated. One advantage in skinning the cat in this new manner is that, unlike the defeated proposal for an office building, which required a zoning change, this text amendment can be accomplished without mailed notice to all the affected property owners within 500 feet of the library parking lot or those within 500 feet of the other identified properties. It was sufficient to put the item on the Plan Commission agenda and to publish it in the Evanston Review. I was unable, and I know that my neighbor was unable, to find a copy of the Evanston Review. That's an old Evanston when we talk about the Evanston Review as an adequate means to notify anybody of anything. We know that such published notice is ineffective notice for those most affected. Moreover, if the proposed text change passes, a proposal for a new office building on the library parking lot would require only the granting of a special use by a margin of 5 to 4, rather than a zoning map change Even if more than 30% of the neighboring property owners objected, the DAPR and the Plan Commission recommended against the project as they did before. Once the city voted to sell the land for the project, it would require only a simple majority of 5 votes to approve the project, rather than a supermajority of 7 votes for the city council to approve an office project which requires a map amendment opposed by the neighbors. In sum, this proposed text amendment appears to be designed to do an end run around the Plan Commission and the public opposition to placing a large office structure on the library parking lot. It appears to violate the purpose for a zoning text amendment, which is, quote, this is from the zoning code, which is not intended to confer special privileges or rights upon any person, but only to make adjustments necessary in light of changed conditions or changes in public policy. It fails to meet the standards for a zoning text amendment that the, quote, proposed amendment be compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of subject property. The Plan Commission should vote not to recommend the amendment. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Stafford. So am I to understand that, Ms. Kerr, you're finished with your comment? Okay, thank you. So I've noticed that we do have Alderman Fisk present, but we do have other people who are signed up to speak. Now, I would give, if it's allowable or if people do not object, Alderman Fisk could speak first, or we can go in order, depending upon how you would like to, if you would like to relinquish your spot in line, we can have Alderman Fisk go next. Is that, so would you like to speak, Alderman Fisk? Okay, very good. Please come.
Good evening, Commission members. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak. I want to clarify a couple of things. At the last Commission meeting, I was advised by our Corporation Counsel not to be here to speak because there was a pending project that would be affected by this text amendment pending before the City Council. And under the Council rules, that's not allowed. So that has expired, so there is nothing pending before the Council now, so I'm free to come and share my thoughts with you or to answer any questions that you might have. I want to be very clear that I am not here to talk about an individual perceived project. That's not, wouldn't be appropriate, and but I will tell you what my thoughts were behind making this reference to the Plan Commission. I'll also just remind you that I'm the council liaison to the Plan Commission, so even when I'm not here, I'm watching you on TV and taking an interest in your deliberations and your hard work. So if I could ask Ms. Jones, could you just pull up the map in the packet that says properties affected by the proposed text amendment? Yeah, that right there. So Ms. Safford was correct that there are 7 properties that are proposed properties that would be subject to the text amendment. I want to take you back a little bit to the 1921 zoning ordinance. A few years ago, I wrote a nomination that included an attempt to recognize the apartment hotels that were built in the 1920s when downtown Evanston really became what we know today as downtown Evanston. It sort of began in 1919 with the construction of the Orrington Hotel and the North Shore Hotel, and then downtown really developed after that. But it was clear that in 1921 there was a understanding that these commercial buildings would exist on the periphery of downtown, partly because in recognition of the fact that we, even at that time, were a transit-oriented development community, and it was an effort actually to keep people moving throughout the city without cars clogging up the streets. So this text amendment actually is with a nod to that. It also is an effort to identify a way that we might be able to encourage mixed-use development or office buildings on the edge of downtown that are consistent in character with the existing buildings in R6. So if you look at if you look at D3, for example, D3 and R6 are very close together, so it wouldn't be actually rezoning to D3. It would just make office use a special use in R6. And as you know from the zoning ordinance, R6 doesn't prohibit office use. I mean, if you live in a condo or a co-op or an apartment building in R6, you can run your office out of your building. But if you do new office now, you have to be in a building that was built as a single-family home, I think no more than 2 stories, although I'm sure Megan can correct me if I'm wrong on this. And that's not consistent with the uses that we see in the downtown. So there are 2 things that are going on in the downtown. The first is that we have people who want to come to Evanston and start or grow their businesses in Evanston, and we don't have room for them. And so how do we do that and protect the character of our downtown? This seems to me to be a logical way to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I made it contingent on not allowing commercial use on the ground floor, so it would be more in keeping with the residential uses that are there. The 7 properties that, the other point that I wanted to make, that was the first point. The second point is that some of these properties have office uses on them already that are not allowed under R6, but yet they're operating as office uses under R6. So how do we correct that in our zoning ordinance? So one property owner, for example, that has an office building on their lot has, I think, testified before the commission that they're interested in expanding that use away from what was traditionally the use of that building into offering the space for rent for unrelated uses. That's not consistent with R6 zoning unless you make this text amendment change. So I'm really looking at this as more of a housekeeping issue, is how do we bring all of these things into compliance and make them work? So when you look at the 7 properties here, you have 3 properties actually of the 7 that have been actively discussed either at the Plan Commission or will be coming to the Plan Commission, have been discussed in the community as potential development sites. And I think you can probably tell which ones those are. It's the library parking lot, the King Home, and the Sojourner Church property. Those are the 3 that have been discussed. The Lou Malnati's site is a small 2-story building next to Sherman Gardens Co-op building. Had a meeting at Sherman Gardens the other day. Sherman Gardens isn't going anywhere, but it would make that office use on that corner. Actually, if we brought it into compliance, once the ground floor commercial changed hands, that it would no longer be ground floor commercial with this text amendment. And that is something that, as the ward alderman for that site, I can tell you has been a continuing problem with restaurants on that particular block and the problems that they cause to the neighbors. So actually this text amendment does bring the use of the buildings, again, office building with no ground floor commercial, retail, food service, it makes them more compatible with R6 zoning and residential zoning. The other properties that are on here are occupied by apartment buildings, other situations. There has been, and I think staff would probably tell you that from time to time we get serious interest in where can I come that's close to the downtown that I can build an office building. The interest of the City Council, in my view, is that a commercial use is taxed at a higher rate and yields more tax revenue to the City of Evanston, and is therefore desirable. So my question for you is, does this make sense to fit some of these uses into a residential R6 district that, according to the zoning code, is intended to be high-intensity residential, does it make sense to fit this in order to keep the height of the proposed office buildings at a reasonable height, so as to preserve the character of the areas of downtown that are on the border of downtown? So I will tell you that a couple of aldermen and I have been meeting to talk about downtown zoning and where we're going with downtown zoning. That will eventually come to you. But it's a challenge, and it's a challenge to figure out how we accommodate what we want our downtown to do with the way the downtown is. And so this is a kind of creative, very tiny, small step to take to say, let's put this forward, see where it goes. It's a special use. It's not any kind of a done deal. It comes to council. Council discusses. People come and talk and tell us what their views are on the particular property. But to have it characterized in the way that it has been, I think, is unfair to the discussion that we're trying to have at council about where we go as a downtown. And that's why this is very specific. It's not, we're not talking about other business districts. I have some concerns about some of them in my ward, but this is not about any other business district than just the downtown. So when you look at the downtown as a whole, we need office space, we need office workers, we need to keep our small businesses going, we need to take advantage of our transit-oriented development. We need to attract business in our central business district. And what we've seen over the past few years is a lot of residential. Well, now we're seeing the office uses come back, and we want to be able to respond to them in a way that's creative but also respectful. So that's my explanation to you guys. I'm going to leave you to deliberate because this is your show. It will come to council, and then I will have another chance to comment on it. But I just wanted to explain why I wasn't here last time and what my thoughts were behind this. So again, if you have any questions, let me know, but otherwise I'm going to leave you to it.
Okay, so you're intending on leaving?
Is that okay? I mean,
Well,
I'm happy to answer
I was just
questions.
wondering if there were questions from the commissioners, and if so...
I just want to be respectful to you. I don't want you to feel that I'm standing here watching you or something. I just want to. Any?
Do you have, is there any evidence of people wanting to build office buildings in Evanston?
Yes, there is.
Do you have any evidence that could support that claim?
Yes.
Okay. I've not heard of anybody wanting to build office space in Evanston, other than this one proposal.
Well, you've got 601 Davis coming in front of you. I mean, that's on its way. But there's other office
Right.
users. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, and we have a process to go through. And I was just curious, would you support this text amendment if it excluded the library parking lot property?
That's in my ward too, so I have a little bit of a problem with that because for example, the library parking lot right now, it's a surface parking lot. That's not consistent with R6 zoning. I'm not asking you to change the library parking lot to something that is consistent with R6 zoning. But the questions that were raised when we were even talking about the development on the library parking lot were very different. And one of the concerns I have is for the WCTU and their administration building, which is a office building in back of the Willard House. And and again, Megan, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe under our zoning ordinance, the WCTU can continue to use that office building in whatever way it wants, and that's consistent with being a membership organization. So I think that would fall under the membership organization under R6 zoning. But once they rent it out to anyone else, then it's inconsistent with R6 zoning. So this text amendment would actually protect the WCTU and their ability to rent out their office building. That's my understanding.
Okay, all right. So so if you've been deliberating in city council about how to best form the downtown area, do you think this is the best way to allow or expanding the office, the ability to build offices or the area for that, or are there better ways to go about this? Because my understanding is some of the controls in the downtown area do not apply if it's residential area. So,
Well, let's take the King Home for an example. So the King Home would fall under this. So it would fall under this text amendment. And as we know, the owner of that property has, I believe, already petitioned to have commercial ground floor space on a building he owns on the same, right around the corner. No, it's Grove. It's Grove. So I would expect, I wouldn't be surprised. I have not heard of any plans, but I've heard that there's discussion of plans for that site. And I would very much prefer not to see ground floor commercial on that site. That's my own personal opinion. It's not one of the council. And I really do want to say that while the three council members, when I was chair of planning and development, we established this subcommittee. The council is aware that we've been meeting to talk about how we're using our downtown, trying to see if the downtown boundaries need to be changed. But the downtown boundaries are large. I mean, they include all of this except for, I believe, the King Home. I think the King Home is the only one that falls outside.
It's all the blue area.
Yeah, all that falls out, that falls outside. So that's, but for example, on the east side, the downtown boundary really extends down to Hinman Avenue, and I personally don't agree with that. I think the west side of Hinman Avenue ought to be protected, but I wasn't there when that boundary was established, but that's been the traditional boundary. Whenever whatever document you read, that's been the traditional boundary. But with the development of 811 Emerson, now we're seeing the northern boundary of downtown moving to the north. So I was trying to hold the line with Emerson being the northern boundary, and now we've skipped over that, and so now it goes down to the alley behind it. So we're seeing some movement in the downtown. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I think it deserves some thought, and that's what this commission is here to do, is to give it some thought. We can, as a council, we can talk about that, but it really, you're the ones whose job that is.
Okay.
Anybody else?
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank
Thanks
you very
very
much.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go back to public comment. Vicki Burke has.
Hi, I'm Vicki Burke, and I live at 1409 Rosalie Street. I am here to officially represent the WCTU. The city, Wally has a letter, Alderman Fisk has a letter, and the mayor has a letter with my name, address, and along with Glenn Medea, that we are officially her representatives with any of the talk and negotiation, and the WCTU who owns the property. I'm also the chair of the Center for Women's History and Leadership, who manages this Frances Willard House Museum and the archives, which is in the administration building. I can answer any questions you have about what is happening at that property, because I've been working intimately with Sarah Ward and the WCTU for the last 3 years, and have been at council meetings, DAPR meetings, planning commission meetings about all of this. The WCTU and Sarah Ward is not happy with this. They did not ask for this. They were not contacted for this. In fact, the one and only time that we've had any kind of meeting with our alderman was August 14th, 2017, in the last 3 years. So the administration building currently is being used exclusively by the WCTU. They maintain one office there with a part-time staff that functions to get out materials, answer phones. The Francis Willard Library and Museum. We have a part-time archivist in that place, and we have a summer intern that is working on processing all of the WCTU California unions paperwork that they have shipped to us as the unions are closing all across the country because the WCTU is a sunsetting organization. And we have researchers that come from all over the world because we have an archives and library that does not exist with material on suffrage and temperance anyplace else. So that's the current use of it right now. And the museum, we're restoring, we're, getting visitors and all kinds of things. This would definitely affect us. We are, I believe, grandmothered or grandfathered in because the houses have been there since 1860 to 1880. 2 of them are used as residences and always have. And we have students from Northwestern living there, and we pay taxes on those 2 properties. So if you have any questions, we do have a vision for the future with the administration building, which would include some rental possibilities to like-type situations, grassroots women's organizations that are trying to get started with either not-for-profit or for-profit interest in women's issues, kind of a incubator focused on not-for-profit that match our mission. Would be no alcohol, continue to be absolutely no alcohol, smoking, drugs on the entire property. And it is a local historic district, and it is each one of the buildings on the property have their own designation and significance. The Willard House being the most protected in the city. So if you have any questions you want to ask me, I'm not going to use the 10 minutes, but that's just a little bit of background.
Okay, well, we set the precedent with Alderman, so I might just open it up to questions. All right, I think we're good at this
Okay,
time.
thank you
very much.
Oh, and thank you very much for Marcia agreeing to Marcia's continuance and allowing us a little bit of time to kind of figure out what's going on.
Thank you. The testimony last time was very insightful. So, Betty Esther has signed up for this also, I believe, right? I know you were participating in the next committee meetings for the next issue, but.
Thank you. My name is Betty Esther. I stay at 1921 Dewey Avenue, which is in the 5th Ward. I have a question for clarification in that the residential zone in R5 right now for the office in there, it says it was special use. Will changing this here, although it says it's near the downtown area and it's close to, it gets to Asbury, which put it close to where the residential in the 5th Ward, and we had the proposal for a high bill unit that didn't go up. Will that fall over into the 5th Ward, although it comes to Asbury and going forth? Would that affect us? If it is the case that we will start having office spaces in high building with apartment, then I think you should vote no on this.
All right. So,
But if it doesn't,
so although this is time for public comment, I'm going to venture out and say that no, this is only for R5 and R6 that specifically adjoin downtown districts D3 and D2. All right, so it would not extend to the 5th Ward at all. So
okay.
okay, just just so you are
It's
assured
kinda
of that.
is.
Okay, all right,
But
very
thank
good.
you.
You're welcome. All right, I believe so. Ray Feidman is not speaking on this issue, or are you signed up on this issue? You've checked residential care homes, but not the office use in residential district. So this is specific to office use in residential district. Did you want to make comment on that issue?
I actually have a problem with the process. I have a problem with text amendments. I think that the...
No, sir, if you're going to address the council, you have to come up and speak, say your name and address, and so we can just get you on the record, so you can have your objection.
Thank you.
Your comment.
Ray Friedman, 2nd Ward, 2310 Greenwood. I've been in Evanston about 3 years. And since I've been here, I got involved in politics, which I've never been in before, because they built a 16-unit or proposed to build a 16-unit at Pittner and Dempster. The process, there was several, in my area, several text amendments that could have been done by zoning, and we talked to our alderman about it. There's nothing that made sense in this building. What I'm concerned about is specifically why there's no special use permits for that particular building, that 16-unit building.
Well, we're specifically here just to address
that text amendment.
this specific text amendment for this issue of residential office use in R5 and R6 related to. So there's nothing about previous issues, other buildings, no specific cases, just this text amendment.
Then my question would be, why wouldn't it be a zoning change rather than a text amendment?
So it's time for public comment and not questioning. So I'm
Okay.
sorry. All right. So,
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Let's see. We had Vicky Burke. Checker. Oh, I believe I've overstepped Marianne Ben Isle, or is there Ben Beniste? Okay, there's no one here by that name. All right, very good. So that was from last meeting, but okay. All right. So,
I was in the last meeting, held off.
you held off.
So I was on the last.
You
list.
signed up. You signed up before,
Yes.
and your name is
Kira Kelly?
Kira Kelly. We had you. She didn't decide to hold, so it's mismarked here. Okay. All right. Very good.
Okay.
Please.
Great. Yes, Kira Kelly. I live at 2436 Orrington. And I wanted to point out that this text amendment tonight, initiated by Alderman Fisk, occurred between the City Council's vote to deny the library parking lot high-rise in March and the pending vote for the same council to reconsider this ordinance. To review the specifics of the situation, the City Council library parking lot in March required a supermajority vote, or 3/4 of the vote from council, which was triggered by 30% of the property owners within 500 feet who petitioned for this, as you know, their legal right per our zoning ordinance. And why was a supermajority required? Because the library parking lot was an office building, which was not included in the current zoning. If today's text amendment passed, it would eliminate the supermajority requirement for the library parking lot, as you know, to have been passed possibly in this reconsideration vote. It had been pending, and this could have affected the next vote or it could another iteration of this project. Yes, this amendment impacts some other parcels, but there's no doubt the library parking lot was the key one impacted. And just 2 days ago at the City Council meeting, Alderman Nguyen made a motion to hold the vote on the extension of the library parking lot high-rise contract that was slated for a vote the next meeting. This is kind of complicated, but anyway, the contract, because she held it, it lapsed. However, the report from Monday's meeting stated that the contract's end was not June 12th, but June 30th. So I was glad to hear that Alderman Fisk mentioned that it was truly dead. Anyway, the point is, to reiterate, the stated purpose is not to relieve particular hardships or confer special privileges or rights to any person. Thus, I believe the timeliness of this proposal in between these two votes and Alderman Fisk's interest in getting an office building on this site is conferring a special privilege to Alderman Fisk, these developers or future developers. And don't take my word for it. A recent Evanston Now, sorry, this printing didn't come out very well, says Fisk seeks a new path to office building proposal. The change would remove one barrier to approval of a planned office building at 1714 Chicago Avenue. Opponents collected petition signatures from neighbors, which under city rules raised the threshold for approving the zoning map amendment to 3/4. Changing what's allowed in the property's existing zone to permit office developments would remove that obstacle for development. So even if this development is dead, a major amendment like this should not be instigated by one alderman's rushed attempt to change the terms of a council vote to get a project through. It should not have been slipped in on the eve of Memorial Day weekend so that as few people of the hundreds or even thousands of people who live in that area would likely not know about it. If this amendment is truly intended to be in the best interest of the city, should it not be thoroughly studied by all of you? Should it not be vetted? Should we determine what kind of an impact it might have on these busy residential streets, the parking, the capacity, the infrastructure? Should it not be initiated by you, the Plan Commission, rather than on the eve of a huge vote? Should there not be a true public hearing or at least discussion to involve the stakeholders, the residents in this area? I also want to point out, as you know, an enormous office building is coming at 601 Davis, where it is zoned for it in the most dense area of downtown. This should cover it and in an appropriate zoned area. You are the stewards of our zoning ordinances, and anyway, thank you for your consideration and hope you vote against it. Thank you.
There we go. I am going to close the public testimony portion of this hearing and open it up to questions from the commissioner of the petitioner, who is staff at this point. So I think we should start to ask some questions about this issue. So who's got some thoughts?
We're questions now?
Yes, we're at
questions. Okay. I'm curious to know if the city staff, Megan, if there have been instances where the current zoning regulations have been an impediment, this specific text has been an impediment to a developer seeking a project in the city of Evanston. And has any developer specifically requested that this be removed to make it easier for them to build office space?
With me being one of the staff members who talks with developers, I probably need to talk with some of the other staff members to see exactly what projects may have been proposed. We actually get a fair number of questions and proposed projects that come through the office that may or may not be viable projects. I do believe there have been questions about some of the other sites that actually are within some of these affected areas for possible development. They haven't specifically requested this use. I don't know if they've talked with Alderman Fisk about this particular reference or not. We'd have to discuss that with her. But I do know there are usually going to be some projects or at least some kind of interest that has occurred for some of these available sites or possible changes of use.
All right. Anyone else? Commissioner Isaac, any Anything from you?
I don't have any questions now.
Okay. All right. Well, I have some kind of basic questions. I think, and I'm going to ask staff, when a zoning, these are just very basic kind of zoning questions. When a zoning district is designated, for instance, residential, can you explain what the purpose of that is, and what kind of uses are allowed in that? And then follow that up with, when there are special uses, what is the general purpose of what a special use is within a district? Do you understand what I'm asking? Am I clear or not?
The first portion of that, when you're speaking on designating something a residential,
right.
are you
As a
talking about
purpose-
existing zoning or new map amendments?
When you're writing a zoning ordinance, the purpose of designating something a residential district and giving it certain densities and things is to what? Is to make that area specifically residential in nature.
Yeah, and I could add to that. Particularly for this R5 and R6 districts, there's a purpose statement for each district.
Yes.
It's included in the staff memo, but for the R5, it's intended to provide for infill development of a mix of multifamily residential structures at a medium density, including townhouses, two-family dwellings, three-story walk-ups, and courtyard apartment buildings that characterize the traditional multifamily housing development in the district. And then the R6 district is intended to provide for high-density residential development of primarily multifamily dwellings, particularly in and around the downtown area.
Okay, so in both of those districts, there's a list of permitted special uses. And the general purpose of those permitted special uses, can that be categorized as in any way? I mean, when they're usually placed in a district like that?
I'd say, and again, for each district, there is a list of permitted uses and special uses. For the R5 and R6, those lists were included in the packet as well. So generally, the permitted uses are speaking more to that purpose statement of the residential uses, and then there are additional list of special uses that could be applied for. Special uses generally have the potential to create some sort of impacts that a permitted use may not have. So that's why it goes through that process, typically through the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so there could be conditions attached, there could be ability to approve or deny those special uses.
But the permitted uses are not, there's never in a residential district a permitted use of manufacturing or industrial. There are usually things that are beneficial to residential type zoning, such as educational institutions, churches, things that have a synergy with residential and help to make a stronger community within the residential area. Is that true or not true?
I think that's a fair characterization. Additional uses be along those lines, like parks or residential care homes, for example.
Okay. Also, there was some talk about the existing structures within the historic district. How would those be categorized? Are they existing non-conforming uses that are allowed by zoning, or how are they handled? Because the alderman made some statements about trying to bring uses that were not consistent with the existing area into line. Is that these are permitted or not permitted uses within the zoning area?
In an older community like Evanston, there are a number of legal non-conforming uses, so uses that predate the zoning regulations. It would be able to continue as legal non-conforming. With regards to specific properties, we need to research those and the history of those.
All right, so it's quite common to have non-conforming uses within these districts from historic precedent. Okay. Okay. If this was allowed to have, characterize this this request, it would allow buildings within the R5 and R6 district to be offices of of certain height and density. And there was quite a bit of discussion at the previous meeting about parking. So I know in the downtown district, parking is not, if the floor is primarily parking, it is not counted toward the height of the building. Is it counted toward the height of the building would an office have parking as part of the counted height in the building?
Yes, in the downtown districts, there's the ability to exclude that the height of the parking levels. There's not that in the residential districts.
Okay. And so the determination for the amount of parking is not relevant to where it is. It's designated by the use. So the use, so office use has certain limitations for parking. Are there any discounts or things for being in a residential area or a downtown area for the amount of parking, or a transit-oriented area, or what affects the amount of parking if we were to make this for an office use? What determines it?
Sure. For commercial land uses such as office, the parking requirement is the same for that use itself. However, within the downtown districts, there's a discounting of 20% of the parking requirement.
Okay, so there'd be no discounting of parking within if we were to, for office, if we were to approve this.
That's correct. It would not apply in the R5 and R6.
Okay. All right. So loading is the same. It's not specific to an area and is designated by the use.
That is correct.
Okay. Let's see. So in the R5 and R6 districts, I don't find I have some misunderstanding of how the bulk regulations are. The R5 and R6 districts speak about the bulk of the building or coverage of the lot based on the number of dwelling units, but there's no dwelling units are not an applicable unit to an office building. So how is bulk or density, which is normally controlled by FAR, controlled within, if we were to approve this?
Sure. In the residential districts, you correctly state that there is no floor area ratio limitation. There are limitations on the building lot coverage, so the percentage of the lot that could be covered by a building.
So, and that's any building within the district. It's not particular to residential.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. So, what else? What else is not covered? So in the downtown district, there are certain. This might not be code, but might not be mandated, but there are the regulations for the what is it called? The pyramid, step back,
ziggurat
bulk form and things. That would not be all of the regulations that are within the downtown area that try to make it consistent with a ground level and step back and create openness above ground level. Those would not be controlled underneath this designation for a tall building.
That's correct. There's no ziggurat setback requirement in the R5 or R6 districts.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this appears to me to be allowing a totally different use by a totally different use for a designated zoning district instead of one that's not, in this idea of being things that are compatible with residential necessarily. Are there any? Do you know of any other communities or zoning ordinances that have this kind of precedent for this kind of allowing an office building to be built within a residential area?
I'd say there's a wide range in communities zoning ordinances. We've not specifically researched the issue of within our districts whether offices are permitted.
Okay, so I don't know if we're doing a totally new thing. All right. So does anyone else have any questions about how this would affect what kind of control or? So I noticed one other question. So it seems to me in the wording of the text amendment, it's referring this simply to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which seems to be a matter of residential scale or that kind of nature. Is there at what point would the process for a special use go to the Zoning Board of Appeals or then go to the Plan Commission? At what point would it change, or should there be language that within the proposed language that would designate, because of the scale in an R5 or R6 district, designate it to go one way or another? Is there?
Yeah, so typically a special use permit is reviewed by the Zoning Board of Appeals, who makes a recommendation to City Council. In the case of a planned development, and there's certain thresholds for qualifying a project as a planned development, in that case it would come to this body, to the Plan Commission. So that the current language in the code speaking to offices speaks to the Zoning Board of Appeals, because that's within buildings that originally housed a single-family house, so they would not qualify into that planned development threshold.
Okay. All right. Yes. Commissioner Isaac.
If someone looking to construct an office building in an R6 district wanted to exceed the maximum lot coverage in an R5 or R6 district, what methods would they have of increasing that lot coverage? Because I'm looking at the R6 and it says it's 50% lot coverage. Seems appropriate for, a house, but maybe not for an office building.
Right, so it depends whether the project is a planned development or below that threshold of planned development. If it was not a planned development, could seek zoning variations for any number of factors, including the lot coverage. If it's a planned development, then it would be seeking a site development allowance to increase the building lot coverage. And the maximum site development allowance for that is included in a table in your packet as well. So for R5, the increase or that maximum site development allowance is 15% building lot coverage, and for R6 it would be an additional 20% building lot coverage. That's a site development allowance.
So you said that there are two methods for increasing the building lot coverage. One is through the PD, and the other is by seeking a variance.
That's correct.
What is the largest magnitude of variance that someone can seek before it would become a planned development and therefore come to this body?
Whether it's a planned development or not is based on minimum thresholds for how much development is occurring or being proposed. Over 20,000 square feet, for example, would qualify as a planned development. So it's not necessarily the degree of variance from the standard, whether it's a planned development or not, but the pure volume of the proposed building or lot.
So an office building that had greater than 20,000 square feet of usable space would still be required to seek plan development approval.
That's correct.
Okay.
Is that it?
Only questions?
So I have one more question. If this were recommended to the city council for approval and the city council approved it, would any existing applications be covered by this, or retroactively, or would it need to be reapplied for any projects that were?
Yeah, if there were a project that were reviewed under previous standards and wasn't through the process, hadn't been granted approval, then they would have to go back through the process under these new standards. For example, the office building that was proposed at the library parking lot.
So it's when the file is opened, it's the ordinance at that time it's judged under, or where is the designation of when this ordinance would take effect to any existing project would not be affected by this? Do we know? Or
if a new project were proposed, that would be subject to the requirements at that time it was proposed.
the time it's proposed?
Right.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. All right. So if there's not any more questions of staff, I think I'd like to open it up to comment and discussion by the commissioners. So, does anyone have any comments, concerns? Commissioner Pagozzi.
Yeah, I think we've reviewed this quite extensively, thought through it. I find the testimony that was given tonight by the Alderman unconvincing. I don't. Well, I won't go there, but I don't understand what problem this is trying to solve, other than the obvious issue that people are saying that was stated it was not trying to solve. I don't see this as a resolution to stimulate more development, more mixed-use development, more office development. I don't believe that, and I've not seen or heard of any evidence that this is going to help in any regard.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
What would be a better way to stimulate more mixed use and office development?
That is out of my expertise. Okay. I don't know.
Well, I would venture it, but go ahead.
That's all, and I just don't. The perception that's out there, if it is in fact true, which it seemed to be headed in that direction in terms of why we were voting on this text amendment, I think is extraordinarily bad governance, and I think it games the system in terms of what these committees are supposed to do. There is a process for approval for planned unit development for a variance that is open to anyone and everybody that wants to build something that is not compliant with the current zoning laws. So these rules, we're all here because they have a purpose, and we're here to try to interpret and as best that we can those rules and regulations. I think the process has already been vetted and we've gone through it. If certain people didn't like the result and are trying another way to achieve their desired ends, that's. I think it's an insult to this committee. Our time is voluntary. This is the second night in a row that I've sat and listened and considered this text amendment, and if someone is trying to make a case to state that this is the right thing to do, it is having the exact opposite effect on me. So I will vote no on this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goddard?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, if there is a need for more office space in the city, it seems to me the least appropriate place to put it is in some residential areas. We have many areas in downtown that are zoned for office buildings. 20 years ago, everyone was building condos downtown. 5 years ago, we started building apartments downtown. So maybe now we'll get more office developers in, and they'll start putting up buildings that will meet that need. I don't think we need to go out into outer residential areas.
Are you finished?
Yes, I oppose this.
Okay. Commissioner Isaac?
Yeah, I came into the meeting today after having participated in the last meeting, quite skeptical of what I'd heard about this text amendment. But there are a few things that I heard today that I think opened my eyes a little bit. And the first I'll say is Chair Lewis's questioning of staff, and that it doesn't seem to me that the proposed text amendment actually solves any problem, especially the problems that Alderman Fisk had referenced in her testimony today. For example, the library parking lot is a 26,000 square foot site, and the developer was looking to put up a 130,000 square foot building there. Under this change, they'd only be able to put up a 13,000 square foot, have 13,000 square foot of coverage, and would basically get half of that at most. I don't see building small, slender and tall office buildings in residential districts solving a problem. So, the concern that this is an end around, I think, is my concern was lessened after hearing staff's responses to Chair Lewis's questioning. That being said, Alderman Fisk's testimony did, I think, open my eyes to that maybe we do need to look at how we're going to address, a potential expanding of downtown if we want to do that, how we're going to address the need for more office space, but one concern she had was that the downtown area may need to be expanded. Well, if it does, it doesn't seem to me that having an office building that doesn't have first floor commercial to be an appropriate way to expand the downtown area. If we as a community say that, this area that previously wasn't considered part of downtown should, because we're looking at not what's there now, but what we think should be there in 20, 30, 50 years, then let's do that appropriately. And, while if forced to vote, I would, vote against this, this proposal, my recommendation would be that we send this proposal to the zoning committee to discuss it there and get some more information about how we can potentially modify it, to investigate some of the concerns and some of the ideas that Alderman Fisk had.
Commissioner Halleck.
Yeah. My light didn't work, so just a couple of things to say. One is that this issue of expanding downtown, I have always believed that, and I think the zoning ordinance reinforces this, that the place for density, with the transportation that's downtown, public transportation, the place for density is in the downtown area. And I think when you expand it, especially incrementally like this, I think it just dilutes the whole idea, and it's the wrong approach. So that's one. Secondly, I really don't see what advantage changing the verbiage in the zoning ordinance has. I listened to all the testimony. I just don't see it. I was particularly bothered by Alderman Fisk when she mentioned, when someone suggested that what if the library site was excluded, and she said no, can't do that. And I think that's very telling, and it makes me question her motivation. So I will vote no on this.
You finished? Okay. Is that Commissioner Draper?
From my standpoint, I am a fan of increasing mixed-use development, and I think that can be beneficial in a lot more neighborhoods. But as was said by the other commissioners tonight, I think that this probably is not the right way to do it. And what we're looking at with the comments also from the public, that this is looking like spot zoning and only this area is right around the certain districts. I think that's kind of confusing. If we want to relook at the whole downtown process, I think it should go through a zoning amendment and not these 7 properties. And I think that's probably the major issue. As far as the library parking lot, me personally, I can say that we didn't vote no because it was an office, it was the building itself. So this wouldn't necessarily solve all those issues, but that's just going back to the one thing, is that each one of these ones should really be reviewed as the building in itself, and not that it was a big difference.
Okay. Commissioner Dugan.
I am going to vote no as well, and I don't see the objection to another level of scrutiny for this type of development. There's so many other things that a developer has to do that are onerous, and I think we have the right to closely scrutinize in several of our commissions a project that might go into one of these sites.
Okay. At this time, I'm gonna scold myself for my bad manners. First of all, 2 housekeeping things. One, I would like to thank Commissioner Isaac for his chairing the previous meeting in such a good and workmanlike way. It was very well done. I wish I were nearly as good as you. And then I need to welcome our new commissioner, Jane Sloss, who is at the end. And I'm not going to put her on the spot if she doesn't want to comment. But if you would like to comment now, welcome. And you don't have to. I know it's hard. It's a lot of things going on, and so.
No, I would agree with the other comments that it does seem that this is a discussion that merits further examination in terms of the direction that the downtown should go, but probably something that should be undertaken in a comprehensive way rather than kind of a piecemeal approach, which this seems to be.
So I'll start with my comments. I would reiterate all of the things about the comprehensive. It just does not seem to me to be good zoning practice to violate the intent of a zoning district as a residential or a manufacturing or whatever kind of district it is. If there is need for another use, it should be modified in some other way. I know that the comprehensive plan for Evanston is to be periodically updated, and it's my understanding that the last update was in 2000. So if we were to look at the need of expanding the space for office, or if we're to look at providing existing space that might more facilitate office, I think it should be part of a larger study that could have more public input and process for it if it's that big of an issue, as the Alderman was saying. There is also the downtown plan has not been updated for, I believe, 10 years. It was last done in 2009, or might be originally authored then. So that said, I also believe that it would be much better public policy and process to make a major change, which this is not an insignificant change as the impact of providing a house worth of office space within a residential district. That's a relatively minor change to a zoning district, the character of the zoning district, but to allow large structures within a zoning district is a major change to the character of that area. So I think what we have before us is four possible paths. One is to recommend approval of the text amendment as is. We could recommend approval with any modifications. I inferred that there might be some language about the scale of, about mentioning the referral to the Plan Commission might be added to that as applicable, or some language saying to the applicable body for review, the body with jurisdiction for review, as opposed to specifically naming the zoning committee, which would be applicable if it were residential in scale. But since this is not now opening it up to a larger scale, I think that's not necessarily the one path, and wouldn't be good, I think, good language. Or we can recommend denial, or we can, as Commissioner Isaac mentioned, refer it to the zoning committee of the Plan Commission for further study. Is there any discussion about our possible paths? All right, so before we go there, I think we need to review against the standards. I know you're getting nervous with I'll forget it again, yeah. Okay, so would you like to read them?
Sure.
And we'll say what we find.
As is the case for all of our text amendments, we do have standards for text amendments that must be met in order to pass the proposed amendment. The first of which is whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Comprehensive General Plan as adopted and amended from time to time by the City Council. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing development in the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties, and the adequacy of public facilities and services.
So the first item, where it's consistent with the goals, policies of the Comprehensive General Plan is adopted from time to time. What do any of the commissioners have a venture on that? I would say, in my opinion, it is not meeting the policies of the comprehensive general plan it is in the overall sense, but not in the specific character of the zoning districts that are defined. So I don't. All right. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of existing development within the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Well, there is not a subject property, but there is a subject zoning district that has, and it's fairly limited in scope, and it's of a size that we can say whether an office building within the 7 zones that are there would be compatible with the surrounding properties.
And there's 2 ways to look at that.
Yep.
Because you are next to a downtown district, and that property right next door could be an office building. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I guess, how you read the standard, whether it's compatible, but your point is taken.
Yeah.
Don't forget, these are all properties in residential.
No, they're not, actually. Yeah. Well, please go ahead and comment. I'm sorry.
But most of these are in residential districts, the one where the zoning amendment the text amendment is being called for.
I agree. I'm just saying that all the properties that are affected are adjacent to downtown districts.
Mm-hmm.
Where
but not office buildings necessarily.
Not necessarily,
Yeah.
but the uses in the properties immediately adjacent could be compatible.
And I know of at least one instance it is. The church property is across the street from the medical office building.
Yes, the Sojourn.
And,
yeah.
A church, and yes. So, all right. Well, definitively, that's a maybe. A yes and no. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties, and I would venture to say there's no evidence that's been presented that would say that that's the case. So it does not have adverse effect, and the adequacy of public facilities and services would need to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. But I believe that it's not also violated, because it's not actually an increase in density, and the services should be there. So, with that said, is there any further discussion? Is there anyone willing to craft a motion regarding this text amendment? Commissioner Goddard.
I move we deny the zoning text amendment before us for office use in residential districts.
Okay. Motion for denial by Commissioner Goddard, seconded by Commissioner Pagozzi. So just to clarify, a yes vote is for denial, an aye is for denial, a no is for it's not actually recommending, so it's just, so if we, so this is a process question, it's a little confusing to me. If we vote, if it's not passed, do we need to make another motion? I mean, in this, because it's not denied, it's not anything at that point, that motion, right? Legal. You get where I'm going, right? If the motion was to deny the approval, so that's an action, that's a valid action, and we can call it quits on that, or.
I think part of the problem is you're not actually denying.
Yes, recommend denial.
Recommend
it's
denial.
recommending denial.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to recommend denial, and if we say no to that, then we'll have to have another motion and proceed
That's
with
correct.
another motion. Okay, all right. All right, so can you state your wording one more time? We're recommending denial of the text amendment.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's
Okay. As proposed by staff. Okay. Okay. Okay, so I think this is a roll call vote.
Can we have discussion
Yes.
on the motion?
Yes, let's have discussion on the motion.
Okay. My only comment with respect to the motion is that recommending denial to the city council moves this matter immediately to the city council, and that's I'm not sure that that's appropriate. So that's all I have to say.
All right, well then we'll find out with a vote. There was no. I might ask about the referral. I think you're bringing up the idea of referring it to the zoning committee for further deliberation. I don't know what would be the outcome or further matter, because I think most of the discussion is on. It's on the public record to say that we're believing almost every commissioner said that this should be studied in some other form, and I'm not sure that the zoning committee of the plan commission is the appropriate body to do it. So by saying denial, we're also recommending through the transcript of the notes that we believe that it should be that there should be more action regarding if the true problem is the nature of the downtown area and the uses surrounding it, then it should be studied in some other more comprehensive way.
accept an amendment to that effect to my motion. That if we do vote to deny this, that we recommend that somebody take a look at the entire zoning of the downtown area.
If not the zoning committee of the plan commission, who is supposed to study and make recommendations with respect to zoning amendments, then who else?
Well, what bodies do the comprehensive general plan?
The Plan Commission does have a subcommittee, the Comprehensive Plan Subcommittee of the Plan Commission.
Okay, so that would come to the Plan Commission jurisdiction to modify the comprehensive general plan, if that were designated. And how would such a process get initiated?
Wouldn't we need direction from the city on that?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think redoing the comprehensive plan for the city would be a much larger undertaking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think regarding this motion, it's very limited to I think I think there is this idea that we're saying that this is not necessarily great planning or zoning process to have this kind of language. Now, how it gets changed is if it's needed to be changed is a whole other issue, and it can be proposed in other ways. We're not actually being charged with solving the overall issue. We're just saying whether or not this is the way to do it, in my opinion. So if this motion is defeated, then we may entertain other motions. All right. So So why don't we go ahead and have our vote on, again, it's recommending denial of the text amendment as put forth in PLND 0041, and recommendation, you're saying, and recommending that the, what's the language, that recommending that the issue be studied, that the issue of expanding office use in the downtown area be studied in some other means, or is that further addressed? Okay, all right. So what
can we get a second on that? Because it sounds like it changed again.
Yeah. So yeah, we need an official second. So are you seconding so we amended the language to have the recommendation that it be studied in some other way. Will you second it?
When you say that, okay, what we're presented with is this very limited text amendment. And there seemed to be a lot of agreement around the table that this is a very piecemeal way of looking at a very broad topic that needs a lot of study and further discussion. As evidenced by the questions that you asked, it was not very well thought through in terms of the other ramifications in dealing with the other zoning aspects in those districts. So to me, I think it's just simple. This is what was presented. In the discussion, of course, we agree and we encourage a broader topic on if there needs to be a study of rezoning parts of the downtown. Absolutely. I mean, that's a totally different discussion. But what's being presented before us is a very limited piecemeal text amendment that had a very specific targeted intent.
Okay, so...
And that, to me, I don't think we should commingle the two. I think we should just vote on this and have another discussion about entertaining a much broader, comprehensive, open process, good governance discussion about zoning.
Okay, so if there's no seconding of the amended motion, then the original motion then seconded question of just recommending denial to the City Council for the proposed text amendment stands, and so I think that's what we're voting on. All right? That has been moved and seconded.
All right, so we'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Draper?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Dubin?
Aye.
Commissioner Goddard?
Aye.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac?
No.
Commissioner Pagotzi? Commissioner Sloss? Chair Lewis?
Did you ask Dubin? You did?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
That motion passes.
It's not a clear-cut issue, right? I mean, it's how we go about the process. So with that matter, with that vote, the Plan Commission recommends denial to the City Council of the text amendment as proposed in 19 PLND 0041, and that portion of the meeting is closed. I think it would be good if we took a 5-minute break, and we'll start again with the next case, which is a text amendment for residential care homes, 18 PLND 0094. So those of you who are not wanting to stick around for all that excitement, you can feel free to leave. So thank you. So, we shall call to order or reconvene the meeting of the Wednesday, June 12th, 2019 meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission. We have one other item for old business, which is a text amendment to residential care homes, 18 PLND 0094, of which I believe staff would give a introduction to.
Yes. This actually initially came before the commission in November of last year, so about 6 or 7 months ago. And it was recently at the zoning committee. It was referred to the zoning committee. So since it's been some time, I'll go back and review some of the information that was presented before. The zoning ordinance that we have defines residential care homes as we have two categories. Category 1 is a dwelling unit shared by 4 to 8 unrelated persons, exclusive of staff, who require assistance and or supervision, and who reside together in a family-type environment as a single housekeeping unit. Residential care home, Category 1, should not include a home for persons who are currently addicted to alcohol or narcotic drugs or are criminal offenders serving on work release or probationary programs. We also have a Category 2 for this use, which is essentially the same thing, but it bumps up the number of residents from 4 to 8 to 9 to 15. The Category 1 residential care homes are permitted by right in all of our residential, business, and downtown zoning districts, as well as the C1A, MU, MXC, T1, and T2 districts. They are a special use only in the NUE district. The Category 2 residential care homes are permitted by right within the denser residential districts, R4, R5, and R6, RD1, MU, and MXE zoning districts, and are a special use within the R1, R2, R3, B1, B2, B3, C1A, D2, D3, D4, and MUE districts. I will say that the residential care homes are required to be licensed by the state of Illinois Department of Human Services, as well as the City of Evanston through the Department of Health and Human Services. They must also be a minimum of 900 feet from another residential care home, child residential care home, or transitional treatment facility. So the original proposed text amendment that was reviewed in November of last year was to make all residential care homes a special use. So it would change where I initially stated the permitted uses were and just make it a special use across the board, because that would be for both Category 1 and Category 2. During the Plan Commission meeting at that time, we were also asked to look at strengthening the existing distance requirement that's in place for this use. Ultimately, the commission voted to refer the item to the zoning committee. So during the zoning committee meeting, which happened March 27th of this year, there was pretty good discussion, and some of the main points are listed here. We discussed the existing distance requirement, which is seen as enabling integration of the homes into the community while discouraging a concentration of the use in any one area of the city. There were also concerns regarding creating additional barriers to the establishment of residential care homes and possibly violating fair housing regulations. There's also making all residential care homes a special use while offering a way to alert neighbors to the use in their communities. It could also be seen as an impediment to the placement of that particular use in the neighborhoods, and may also, as I mentioned before, violate fair housing regulations. The zoning committee ultimately voted to recommend that the Plan Commission recommend to City Council that the regulations relating to the use of residential care homes remain the same. So where the use is allowed would remain the same. And that consideration of the text amendment to the zoning ordinance relating to the distance requirement for residential care homes not be recommended at this time. So essentially no change for that, and then revisited at a future date. So that's the general summary of where we are at this point.
All right. I'm going to open up to commissioners if they have any questions for staff. Commissioner Isaac.
Have there been any updates in the Valencia v. City of Springfield case?
I have not seen any. I've also been paying attention to the City of Springfield because they've had text amendments basically that have been on their agenda for many, many months, and it keeps getting continued. I think they are still awaiting a decision on litigation that they are going through.
Just to clarify, this is a fair housing issue, the Springfield?
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's been referenced in the packet that the Valencia case, threw out, for lack of a better term, the distance requirements in the City of Springfield case. Between the zoning committee's meeting and today, I had a chance to read the opinion in that case. And it seems to me that the case involves a reasonable accommodation and doesn't say that the distance requirement in the City of Springfield was illegal. It's just that as applied to the people who were seeking a reasonable accommodation, it was illegal. The city's application of that distance requirement to those people was illegal. So, that's.
Isn't the other issue that it's a special use and that might be discriminatory? That's what, yeah, right. In the Springfield case, that's not the issue.
The Springfield case, I believe the City of Springfield just said that it violates the distance requirement and just said no, where the court then said, no, you were required to consider a reasonable accommodation and issued a preliminary injunction, but we understand that the case is still pending.
Okay. So this is really just questions. We can have deliberations and discussion at the end regarding all of that. So at this point, I'd like to open it up to questions from the public. So there's two people signed up. Ms. Betty Esther, I know you were participant in the committee discussions. Remember, these are these are questions of staff.
Right. Seeing the recommendation, I hope you do go along with the zoning committee and recommend to the council not to change it. Also, at the same time, I would like to invite you on July the 12th here up in the Parasol Room. One of the attorney, Dan Lauder, that is handling the case in Springfield will be here to do a community meeting. We asked for that, and we asked Alderman Simmons to work with us to have him come, since most of those care homes and things are beginning to pop up in the Fifth Ward. So the people in the community understand what is a care home, what is the law and everything, so that we know what we are looking at. What do we need to fight for something? Do we need to say no and sit down and help work out a plan that will be workable and desirable for the community? Thank you. So don't forget July the 12th, 7 p.m. here.
7 p.m.
Parasol Room.
Thank you, Ms. Esther. And Ray Friedman. Sorry. Friedman. Okay. Sorry.
So I'm not allowed to ask you any questions.
No, this is time for questions, but questions regarding the issue of residential care homes, a text amendment.
Okay,
in residential
good.
care. Okay.
Number one, I have a problem with text amendments because I think it closes off the public, where the public, and I've heard it said before, and I know that there are several text amendments that public wasn't involved in, which I think they should be. Mm-hmm. As far as this text amendment, I'm totally confused. Care homes, what is considered a special, a care home, special use for a care home? What is, as I mentioned, you don't want to hear about the 16 unit, but we felt it should be special use. And they said, no, it's not special use. Well, why not? You're changing the zoning, you're changing the use of the property from inclusionary housing to permanent supportive housing. So what is I don't even know that permanent supportive housing is listed. You're talking about care homes. What type of, in that particular building, what type of care are you giving to those people? So it's very confusing. If there's not a category for that particular building, doesn't there need to be?
So what's the question that we can you, so I see, what is a residential care home? That was a question, right?
Okay, good. So we have, my first question.
Okay, go.
Second question. Is inclusionary housing the same as permanent supportive housing? Then question 3, is permanent supportive housing needed to have special use permits?
Well,
that's the way I'm reading it.
Yeah. So if the answers lead to 3, then 3 is okay. But I think what a residential care home is defined in the zoning ordinance, and you have the definition. It's part of the body of the recommendation. Yes. Category. Persons who are currently, there we go, a dwelling unit shared by 4 to 8 unrelated persons, exclusive of staff who require assistance and or supervision, and who reside together in a family-type environment as a single housekeeping unit.
Well, this is 16 units, and it's...
is not...
Okay.
I do not want to hear about this other issue. I mean, This is simply about residential care units, whether they should become whether they should be changed from a by right development to a special use residential care units, and whether there should be a modifications to the distance requirements between those units.
Okay.
So that's all we're talking about.
Okay, so the question then is just simply, is permanent supportive housing required to have special use permits?
I don't think that's not the issue. It's residential care homes, and that's what we're discussing.
Okay, so then the problem is for me?
Yes.
Because we've been discussing this, I've talked to Scott for the last 2 years on this.
Mhm.
The problem is that building doesn't fit then into any category. So
building, not this
1305 Pittner and Dempster.
This is not a discussion topic.
I understand.
Tonight.
You asked me which building. I'm just telling you what building.
Yes, but you're not asking a question. So if you
I did. I asked a question. The permanent supportive housing, is that required to have a special use permit?
But that's not the issue before the committee.
See, what I'm trying to figure out is, where does that building fit into this residential care unit?
It doesn't. Yes. That's it. So, yes.
It should be. Okay.
Can staff just confirm that 1305 Pittner is not a residential care home?
Yes, I think. Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, so
1305
so
is
it has no bearing on this, and so we only need questions that are relevant to the issue at hand.
Okay.
All right. So if you have no further questions, okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman. Yes.
Do I have?
Okay. All right. All right. All right. I think we've gone through. So, do we have any questions of that? We don't obviously have any questions of the people who have publicly commented. So at this time, I'm going to open it up to if you have any comment that you would like to add. Ms. Esther, would you like to add any comment to or have you done, or did you comment? Was your questioning was a statement before, so it's I think it was fairly clear. So
with that, looking at and reading that ordinance and everything and what it limits, and it has a lot of issue of not really dealing with fair housing as form of discrimination, who can be in there, you're not having certain people. I'm glad it's being held, and then the community has a chance to learn about care homes so that we can look at it and see, does this really need to be changed to address the current laws and things about fair housing and stuff, and also look at the distance, and maybe we can find a true answer as to if they are 600 feet apart, will there be an impact, and not say, well, we're not sure. People are looking for a finite answer. We are having, the community is looking at changing. We all deal with change, but we would like to know how these changes are happening. We said they need to be slowed down. Back in 2005, there was a whole big old zoning change that just messed us up anyway. It just made everything worse. So now is a chance, and we are having, you're looking at this here, we can have this chance and opportunity to look at this, because all of a sudden back from 2005, we had quite a few care homes that came into the neighborhoods. So we would like to address it and want to be fair with the people that are buying these homes to care for the people. But we need to understand what we're dealing with. So we do hope you say no, don't vote on it, don't do anything. Give the community a chance to be educated on it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Friedman, any comments regarding this issue? Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we'll close the public comment portion of this hearing, and I will open it up to questions from the commissioners, or even discussion. I think. At this point.
I just have a question of Corporation Counsel, just for confirmation and clarification. No matter what our ordinances say about residential care homes, is it true that should someone make an application for a residential care home that would otherwise be impermissible by our ordinance, no matter how strict or how lax our ordinances are, that the city would still have to consider and, where appropriate, make a reasonable accommodation to the applicant for a residential care home?
Well, reasonable accommodation, it's not any accommodation.
Not any accommodation, but
the accommodation has to be reasonable. I'm having a hard time with your hypothetical. Do you have something more specific? Like, is there a specific example you have?
I guess I'm trying to find out whether this change, whether a proposed change to our residential care home, from a portion of our zoning ordinance, would ever solve the issues that were raised by Valencia v. Springfield?
Well, that's kind of hard to answer because Valencia v. Springfield's not. It's ongoing litigation. The Seventh Circuit instituted an injunction, but the actual case in chief, I believe, is still ongoing. So, it's without a crystal ball, I can't answer that one.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Draper.
Sure. Just wanted to raise that this was brought up at the committee meeting that I was at, and though these people are not here tonight, one of the items that was raised was that there's currently a shortage of care homes and that most of them occur in existing buildings. And this amendment would mean that it'd be really difficult for existing, in the buying process, you'd have to buy the building first and then get the special use permit or wait as a contingency to buy a property. And I see that as making it much more difficult to create more care homes and further impeding the process.
So that's regarding the language for requiring it to become a special use, not the distance requirement.
Correct.
So the entry, the cost of entry for special homes becomes
more difficult
or insurmountable in reality. Okay.
That's how I'm interpreting.
Yeah. Okay. Any other question or comments? I think the deliberations. I think there should be at least some comment or clarification for the record here that the distance requirement is not really settled. I mean, although it's good policy to and agreed to by both the residential care people who were testifying that it helps to alleviate the problem of clustering these kinds of developments. It also there is no it's unsettled precedent of what the distance requirement should be, and that most of these kind of residential care homes are receiving financing from the government, and there are government regulations about to receive their funding, they need to have a certain distance requirement anyway, and so that's already designated. So I think the recommendation coming out of the committee was that we should not change it at this point and wait for precedent and to be set, and then at that time, when it's more settled, we would then amend the ordinance to fit with the general with the settled terms of legality. So as far as the special use, I think the biggest concern, and yes, the residential care home people who testified at the committee meeting are not here. They did express a concern that their budgets are very tight, and that it's very hard to buy housing and then wait for it to become a special, approved as a special use, and in which case, if they don't get the special use permit, then they have property that they can't do anything with. I think there was concern that some of these, that they tend to end up in neighborhoods where the housing is affordable, and that they move into those kinds of areas was of some concern to people, but I think the last issue that was kind of brought up is that that housing of this type is for, why are these people any different than anyone else from a civil rights point of view, and there was not much ability to say that their right shouldn't be the right of any other person to own property and to inhabit property. So I think the recommendation again was to recommend not to change the permitted use to special use, and to not modify the distance requirement. So anyway, is there any further discussion? Is there a motion? Yes. Yes.
I want to thank you, Ms. Esther, for letting us know about the meeting you're holding, and I think it is important with the community feeling like it's being over-impacted by this kind of home. I'm glad you're going to have a discussion with the whole community and Alderman Simmons. And again, if we pass this proposal tonight, it means we will not be making any changes to what exists already.
I don't know if that's the case, but so it's all on the wording of it, right? So does anyone have a motion? I believe the case is to approve a text amendment. Is that not the case? So what are we trying to do? We're trying to.
Would it be possible for us to make a motion to adopt the recommendations of the zoning committee and as our own, and submit them to the city council?
In other words, say that the planning commission.
The recommendations of the zoning committee.
Regulations,
The zoning committee of the plan commission recommends adopting the recommendation of the zoning, recommending the adoption of the recommending of the zoning committee.
We just say the plan
Right?
commission
So,
speaks for the zoning.
or the other way to do it is to vote no on the proposed language adjustments to the, right? To just, so we would say, I motion to approve the changing of the special use in category 1 for the language to residential care homes to be special use and category 2 to be special, as that, and that the distance requirement be changed to, was there specific language for what they were requesting in the language?
That wasn't a part of the.
Oh, that wasn't part of it, the distance requirement. So it's just making it a special use. Okay. So we could vote that, and to vote no on that would be to leave the language as is as a permitted use.
Can we just have a motion to keep the language in the zoning ordinance unchanged?
That's simple.
There was a problem with my motion, so I can.
No.
This motion is.
Yeah. So I move that we do not. I move that we do not change or modify the zoning ordinance.
We need to make it be positive. That we accept.
Chair Lewis.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
we
yes.
have a issue that's been referred to the plan commission, so I think we need to answer
Their question. Correct, yes. So the motion should be, as I stated, to approve the language to change the permitted use to a special use for residential care homes, blah, blah, as it is. That should be the motion. And to vote no is to keep the language the same. Okay?
Is there an option? Can we table this issue until the Springfield case is settled and becomes established law?
I think we've been asked to. I think we're almost doing that by default anyway. It can always be brought up again. I mean, we were recommending through the discussion of the zoning committee that the distance requirement be tabled until precedent is set. So I don't know if that case is.
I think there's a rule in our rules that says we have to make a decision within 120 days.
120 days, right, yes, within
So-
120 days.
It's been a little longer than that, I know, but nevertheless, I don't think we can hold it indefinitely.
Right.
The wheels of justice sometimes turn very slowly.
Yes, they do.
Or within 120 days?
So do I have a motion?
I move to approve the changes outlined in the, in case number 18 PLND 0094.
Is there a second? Seconded.
Can I ask for a point of clarity? So you're voting to approve the zoning
I'm just
recommendation?
making the motion. I'm making the motion to approve.
Making the motion to approve it.
And so if you want to approve, say yes. If you don't want to approve, say no.
He's going to vote differently than this, but maybe
Well, we'll find out.
Yes, we'll find out, yes. All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. So can we have a Do we need to go through any standards for this?
Just for consistency purposes, that would.
So the same standards exist, right?
Yes.
So I think we have to go back. So let's go one by one. Whether the proposed amendment is consistent with the goals, objectives, policies, and of the comprehensive general plan as adopted and amended from time to time by the city council. So I am not familiar with the civil rights or what it says.
I would believe that our comprehensive plan doesn't support violating fair housing laws, and since it seems that most of us believe that these changes would,
Yes.
I would say that standard is not met.
That standard's not met. Yes, I think that's correct. Whether the proposed amendment is compatible with the overall character of the existing development within the immediate vicinity of the subject property. Well, that's specific language to a general text amendment, but can we address it that it is a residential issue, there is evidence within what was presented that residential homes are residential homes and fit within the body of residential districts well, or should be. So
you're saying that
if that's true, then it doesn't, so the text amendment making it a special use would be, no, this would not be met by.
I would agree.
Okay, because it's all this backward stuff, okay. Whether the proposed amendment will have an adverse effect on the value of adjacent properties. I think there was evidence presented in this last article that was that there were several studies, I forget, multiple studies. What was at the on the?
Yeah, I think somewhere in the nature of 50 studies about
50
property values.
studies that having this kind of development, this kind of housing within communities does not adversely affect property values. And it's the adequacy of public facilities and services, I believe, are met. So with that said, is there any modification to the moved and seconded motion? No. I think we can vote on it then. So.
All right. Commissioner Draper?
No.
Commissioner Dubin?
No.
Commissioner Goddard?
No.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac?
No.
Commissioner Pagotzi? Commissioner Sloss?
No.
Chair Lewis?
No.
That motion fails.
The motion fails.
Unanimously.
All right. With that, the issue of 18 PLND 0094 is closed. Do any members of the public have any comment non-related to the cases before?
Did you vote to keep the recommendation that the zoning committee did to say, no, do not do anything?
Yes, that's what we did. Yes. It was confusing to us also. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. So if there is no public comment, do I have a motion for adjournment? Moved Pagotzi, seconded. Dubin, all in favor? Aye. All against? It's unanimous. All right, we are adjourned at 9:25 p.m.